Welcome to Radiant PT. I'm Caitlin Sue, a doctor of physical therapy specializing in pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. I've got a hotly debated topic for you today. It is Kegels during pregnancy. Should you do them? Should you be doing hundreds a day? Are they going to help you with leaking and childbirth? Or are they actually the worst thing and you should never do them? Unfortunately, the answer, like most things PT and most things life, is it depends. It's not really that black and white. So when can they be useful and what do you need to know? Let's dive in. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was in one of those Facebook due date groups. Thousands of moms, all of them in about the same stage of pregnancy. It was a little chaotic. Every single day, somebody would pop in with a cute meme like, "Hey girl, do your Kegels." Or somebody would make a joke about how they pee every time they sneeze now, and then everybody in the comments, if they weren't normalizing it like, it's just the price you pay for having a baby, then they would be up in the comments telling that person they need to be doing their Kegels. Heck, even my midwives gave me a handout telling me I needed to do my Kegels every day. But then if you go online and you follow some of these bigger pelvic floor therapy accounts, you're gonna see messaging like, Kegels are the worst, never do them, they're going to harm you, especially if you're pregnant. So what is the deal? Let's talk about the two main reasons that you might think that you should be doing Kegels and kind of tease out about whether it is the best strategy to achieve those goals. If you're interested, don't forget to hit like so we can get this message out to more pregnant people. First of all, what exactly is a Kegel? Well, a better name, and hopefully someday we can rename it, is an isolated pelvic floor muscle contraction. But the exercise was named after a white male gynecologist who did a lot of research on the pelvic floor, and unfortunately, the name stuck. The pelvic floor muscles, which make up the base of the pelvis, have 5 major functions. 1, to hold up your organs. 2, to pee and poop when you want and avoid it when you don't. 3, sexual function and childbirth. 4, core stability. And 5, blood and lymph circulation. So with all these different functions, it makes sense that a strong pelvic floor would be really important during pregnancy. Many women do Kegels in order to prevent issues like urinary incontinence or prolapse. But the problem is that these issues are multifactorial. It's like telling somebody with shoulder pain to carry a dumbbell around and do 20 bicep curls every time they hit a stoplight. Okay, maybe that works for some people, but why is the shoulder hurting? Is it a weakness issue in the bicep? Maybe, but it could also be weakness in the rotator cuff. Or it could be more of a motor coordination issue. It could also be a postural or even a breathing issue. So do you see how a blanket prescription that every woman should be doing Kegels just doesn't really make sense? For most people, Kegels alone will not prevent or treat these pelvic floor issues. And that's because the pelvic floor does not work in isolation. In the real world, it works as a larger functional system. It reacts to things like impact, pressure, movement, or breathing, and it works together with the muscles of the hips, abdominals, and diaphragm, among others. The second reason that most people do Kegels is to prepare for childbirth. In most conversations that I see, this is due to a huge misconception about the process of labor and a misunderstanding of the role of the pelvic floor. Many people assume that your pelvic floor needs to be strong to push out a baby, and that is just not true. In a physiological birth, it's the uterus and the uterine contractions that are doing the pushing. The pelvic floor muscles actually need to relax, lengthen, and get out of the way to make space for the baby to pass through those 3 layers of muscles. Even in an active or coached pushing scenario where you are intentionally pushing your baby out, you're using a combination of abdominal tensing plus either holding your breath or sending your breath downward to create intra-abdominal pressure. And that pressure is what's pushing the baby downward. The pelvic floor, again, needs to just get out of the way. The last thing you want is a really tight pelvic floor that contracts and resists against your pushing. This is how we end up with babies getting stuck and more trauma to the perineum. Check out my video on perineal tears, which I will link below for more information on that topic. Now, many people, in my experience, more than half of the women that I see in my clinic are actually walking around with hypertonic or too tight pelvic floors. This could be due to stress, posture, breathing mechanics, over-exercising, genetics, you name it. But for this population of women, which is a large population of women, doing Kegels will only make the pelvic floor muscles tighter and exacerbate those risks during childbirth. For most women, their time would be much better spent learning to release those muscles to prepare for birth. Now, there is one important benefit to having a strong pelvic floor during childbirth. Having more bulk in the pelvic floor muscles actually helps to facilitate the baby's chin tuck to help them navigate through the pelvis and the pelvic floor a little bit easier. But I would say for most people, there's other and better ways to strengthen the pelvic floor that don't run the same risks. Okay, so is there any good reason to do Kegels during pregnancy? Yes. Like I said, it's not that black and white. I do use and prescribe Kegels and isolated pelvic floor contractions to my clients in my practice. But it's typically only in the first couple of sessions with a client who's struggling to really connect with their pelvic floor. I use Kegels as a neuromuscular re-education tool. Sometimes we need to learn how to contract and relax those muscles through a full range of motion. Then we can start to coordinate it with our breathing, and then we can start to coordinate it with more functional movements. It's a starting point. It's more of a teaching tool. My goal is not to have you feel like you need to Kegel every time you sneeze for the rest of your life, but maybe this is something that you need to do during pregnancy. But here's my real opinion. The only way to tell if Kegels would actually be beneficial for you is if you're having your pelvic floor directly examined. So the answer to should you do Kegels during pregnancy is this: only if prescribed by a pelvic floor therapist who is assessing your pelvic floor strength, coordination, endurance, as well as how it functions as a part of your core. And they have deemed that it would be beneficial for you at this point in time. If you're curious about how you can do more strengthening for your pelvic floor and for your core in general without doing Kegels, then check the link in my bio. I have my website there where you can book a virtual session with me from anywhere. I've also linked pelvicrehab.org, which is a great resource to search for local pelvic floor providers in your area. And if you're not yet pregnant, make sure that you check out my free guide to syncing your workouts with your ovulatory cycle. If you have questions or you want to learn more, please leave me a comment. As always, thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon.